Boardroom Bound, episode 44. When is the right time to join a board? With Matthew Roberts.
The role of a board member and the role of a non-executive director is one that is changing. I believe that the role of a non-executive director and a board member is to really help a company get from A to B.
Hello, and welcome to this episode of Boardroom Bound. My name is Alexander Lowry, and this is the podcast dedicated to intentional leadership in the boardroom. My goal is to give new and aspiring directors the tips, tactics, and strategies necessary to transform your confidence and build a successful career as a board director. Quick reminder, you can get all of today's show notes at podcast.gordon.edu. And in today's episode, we're speaking with Matthew Roberts. Matthew is the CEO of InTouch Networks, and this is a wonderful organization that I want you to be aware of because the type of service that they offered is a game changer when you're thinking about potential ways you can land a board seat. There are just a handful of organizations like this, InTouch of which I think is the best one out there, which is why I want you to hear about them. Basically, you can think about the executive search firms that we've talked about, those headhunters. They've taken that model, turned it on its head, and changed the pricing structure dramatically. Really exciting opportunity. Of course, there's lots of technology behind it. In addition to that, there's tons of coaching and tools and education that they bring for all of their members as well. I want you to hear about this, to know about it, to think about whether this is the right way that you might want to go forward to help land a board seat. Let's jump into the show. Matthew Roberts, welcome to the Boardroom Bound podcast.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me.
Well, delighted to have you on the show today to talk about, I'm going to describe it for our audience in a simplistic way, is another avenue that you might be securing board roles. So on this show, we've talked a lot for our listeners. There are different paths. Some people, for example, go down, get a nonprofit board, use that to network, get in a for-profit board. They'll leverage their own C-suite and get executives to call to get them opportunities. I would love to talk about InTouch in the way you guys do it because it's clearly a different model, and still you guys have changed the model within the model. So I think there's a lot for us to cover today, but maybe we can just start by, could you tell us a bit about InTouch and what it does, and where's your expertise?
Absolutely. Probably best if I give you a bit of background to the business because then it provides some context as to why we do what we do. So the business itself was actually founded by a headhunter in the UK. He was constantly being approached by companies that wanted and needed the services of what we call in the UK non-executive directors. Mm-hmm. But nobody ever wanted to pay him a recruitment fee for somebody who, essentially, in the eyes of many people, works on a part-time basis. As a result, he started charging people to become part of his network and allowed companies to recruit completely free of charge. So monetizing the opportunity. Ian was the headhunter was still being approached by organisations to provide traditional recruitment services, and Ian actually headhunted me to go and work for another company. Met Ian and told me all about this idea that he'd had, and we got on like an absolute house on fire, and I knew straight away what an amazing opportunity it was.
And you guys have had pretty phenomenal growth from something like 6 people to 150 in 5 years, something like that.
Yeah. So 5 years ago there was me, Ian, and we had a part-time PA because we couldn't afford a full-time one, and we've now got 152 in our Manchester office. We've got 6 in our Edinburgh office, 2 in our London office, and 18 in our Chicago office. So it's been a fantastic 5 years, and yes, some phenomenal growth.
And clearly recognized for it as well. I know in 2018 you were one of the Deloitte Fast 50. You've been on the FT 1000 award-winning technology businesses. So not only just growing and developing, but being recognized for it. And I would love to hear a bit more about that, and we'll talk a bit about the difference of maybe potentially U.S. versus Europe and what that means for your businesses. But I would love to know a little bit more about your story. Someone came and said, "This is what I need," and you went out and you provided it. But did you have to build the market? How did it work? How did people come to realize this is exactly what I would love to have?
I think there's so many amazing people who come to the end of their executive career and don't want it to be the end. And you get some absolutely amazing business people who don't want to retire as such, and still want the opportunity to work and to help and to give their amazing skills to other organisations. And lots of people finish their executive careers and become somewhat lost. They're used to having lots of people around them, lots of people helping them, lots of people supporting them, and all of a sudden they finish their executive career. They're sat at the kitchen table, so to speak, with a laptop in front of them, and what do I do? Where do I go? What's the next step in my career? How do I continue to be someone? And really, in Touch, we helped people with all of those challenges that they suddenly find themselves facing.
I'm envisioning a general who was leading 100,000 troops who retires and goes home, and suddenly it's just him and his wife and his dog sitting around. It's a very different experience.
Absolutely, and I think it's certainly also quite a mentally challenging experience, and sometimes and very often very unsettling for someone. We all give so much to our careers, and to all of a sudden find ourselves without necessarily that support network, I can imagine being a very scary place as well. Our most popular product over in the UK are our various executive coaching packages, and certainly our members back in the UK really value that proposition, and the services that we offer from a one-to-one coaching perspective.
And let's break this down for the business model just to make sure all our audience understands. So I'm going to start by comparing it to an executive search firm. So the giant headhunters, the Spencer Stewarts, the Heidrick and Struggles, that people know, and they can imagine that a giant company comes up and says, we need a new board member, and they get paid a huge retainer to go out and find someone and find the best of the best. And on the other side, there's a model. Let's take a small company who's saying, we're going to grow, we're going to be one of these big companies, but we can't do that now. We certainly can't afford the fees, but we still need great people to grow and develop. And then there's everything in between. So I wanted people to understand, imagine this almost in sort of like an internet-y space. Like you go and there's a website, or almost a clearinghouse of companies are coming in and they're posting their positions that they need filled. And you've got your profile up there and your skill set. It's almost like a dating profile, right? And you're saying whether there's a match. Correct. And then you apply to get together. Help us really understand what that looks and feels like on a regular basis. So Jane Doe comes in and says, this is the tool for me. What does that feel like?
So let me explain. So somebody joins as a member. They pay a nominal annual fee to be part of our platform, and for that they get access. They get a online profile that's fully Google indexed and searchable, so completely open for organisations to find people directly. In addition to that, we have a complimentary jobs board where organisations can come and post a role completely free of charge. We don't take any recruitment fee whatsoever or placement fee. We then provide all the tools and services that somebody may need in order to start developing a portfolio career, whether that be as a board person or as a consultant. And our products and services range from resume writing to online training material, to webinars, to group coaching, to one-to-one coaching. We also have live events all over the US and all over the UK. So every single product and tool an individual would need in order to develop a portfolio career.
And I can attest to the quality of these because I partnered with you recently to lead one of these webinars about how someone lands their first board role. So it's accessible for people, and that was for even people who were not your members. So to raise awareness of the opportunity. And if someone is positioning themselves saying, I know I'm in the C-suite or near the C-suite and I want to get the board roles, help us understand this is a great tool because it allows you, start to build your brand, start to become aware of what the board positions look like and how you apply for them. What would be like the first step someone would be doing as they move forward?
Yeah, so I think it's important to clearly understand who our member is, and very often this person has been in a CEO position or a CFO position, or maybe they've been a partner in a big four firm. Then they're not used to, frankly, having to do things for themselves, and very often even the thought of writing a resume, which they may not have done for 10, 20 years, can be quite a challenging. Can be challenging, and they don't really know where to start. And we have dedicated teams in the UK and the US who provide all of these services for the individual.
And of course, it's a very different skill set. We did one episode, we did a very deep dive into resume writing and building with Matt Craven, where we literally talk about how when you're an executive and you wrote a resume, that's great, but that's not the resume you need to write for your board. It's got to be a very different perspective and pitch. And so talking people through that and working through them is essential.
It's all about being on it rather than in it. And I think that's a phrase that I use very often when I'm describing being a board member or being a non-executive director.
I like that. The phrase I always tend to use is noses in, fingers out, but the same idea, right? I think that's good.
Yeah.
And then for people to understand the context, because we have listeners around the globe, for some this will make total sense. You were talking about how you started out in the UK and the NED market, and it is a very different market in Europe. For example, the way that the rules are written and the way the jobs are posted, NED board positions are very much often sort of open and people can find them and see them, whereas in the US, it tends to be more reserved, sort of more behind the scenes. It's about the networking to get there. And you guys have made a big pivot recently. You talked about the number of people you got in the US and you'd opened the U.S. office very recently. There's a lot of really awesome opportunity here, but it's a different opportunity. Can you talk about what you guys see for the U.S. market that brought you over here and how you're working in this space?
I think it is very different, but I also think the role of a board member and the role of a non-executive director is one that is changing and one that is transitioning, and it's becoming less. It will always be a highly regulated position, but I believe that the role of a non-executive director and a board member is to really help a company get from A to B, and you can surround yourselves like we do ourselves at In Touch with fantastic experience and people who've been there and done it, and that can help an organisation. Again, using that expression from an on it rather than in it perspective. Mm-hmm. And when you're running a business and driving a business every single day, it can be often very difficult to see what's directly in front of you. And I think organisations of any size, it doesn't have to be a Fortune 1000 business. It can be a business of any scale that needs that person to come in and look at a business strategically and help entrepreneurs, help CEOs, help owners to drive the business forward.
And there's no question that businesses of every size and scale need the right board members. That's how they're going to be successful in their growth and development. It's that important. And I would argue some of what you guys are doing is helping that supply and demand meet. Like you're raising awareness of the opportunities. You're helping people find the right position for them. And for some people, probably thinking about the big search firms, it's an opaque process. You don't really get a peek behind the scenes. You don't know what all of the opportunities are. I imagine that transparency is a big part of your business model, right?
Absolutely, yeah. It's a huge part of what we do.
So, Matthew, pretend that we are talking to executives in the C-suite, because that's some of our audience here, and they might be thinking, wow, all of this time I've been paying the executive search firms. Maybe I can go this route instead. Tremendous savings, but still get great candidates. Matthew, can you speak to some of our C-suite executives who might be wondering, wow, this could be a good service for me?
I think the key piece here is, like I said in my previous comment, the role is changing, but also the organisations that need board members and need non-executive directors is changing. Any organisation, whether they're turning over $200,000 or $200 million, needs that help and support. And often the barrier for smaller businesses that require board level expertise and strategic help and advice is cost and is recruitment fees and for that to be a limiting factor is crazy in the world that we live in today. And really, what we do at InTouch is open up the doors for organisations to get that help and advice for absolutely no cost.
And if I go back to that supply and demand item I was mentioning before, so the supply being the companies looking for board seats, the demand being people who want to fill them, to some extent, your business model is successful by matching those people and bringing them together. And there's probably a bit of a chicken egg. You don't want to get all of one in without getting the other and sort of back and forth. As you've moved your business model to expand more in the U.S., is the opportunity in front of you to raise more awareness for companies to realize this is where you can go to find great people for such low cost? Or is it more of convincing more of the people of this is a great avenue?
I think it's twofold. I think it's one, speaking to companies who already have existing boards and are already looking to change or build up those boards. But it's also, like I've just said in my previous comment, opening up the doors for smaller organizations to say, hey, you want to grow, you want to become more successful, come and speak to people who are on our network and get that help and advice that you need.
And thinking about that, you talked about the various resources that you have for people. So the education, the coaching, the tools. I imagine you probably are testing out with your audience about what they're using and how much they're using. What tends to be the most valuable piece for someone joining at the very beginning?
We typically find that our members will go through a journey with us. So they will join and take advantage of our on-demand learning material first of all, and really start to understand what it is to be a board member. But then they will transition to use some of our other services. So whether that be resume writing, cover letter writing, taking advantage of some of our group training courses, our live events, and then right the way up to 1, 2, 3, or even 12 monthly coaching sessions with experts who can really help them understand who they are and what they need to do to build up your own personal brand and get out there and start influencing organizations.
And I know that you guys have a podcast, InTouch Talks Business, that launched within the last year. And I've been listening to the journey of one of your members over the first 5 or 6 episodes about how they went through joining you and trying to find their first NED position and the success that they came to. And I think it's a very successful story, and we'll link to the podcast in our show notes so people can get a bite-sized chunk of like, this was what it might look and feel like for me to move across and find that position.
Absolutely, yeah. It's like I said earlier, it can be a very daunting task to get your first role and to get to really move into this completely new career, and all the tools and services that we offer are there to help someone do that.
And when you think about the opportunity in front of you, do you find much difference in the way you offer it in Europe versus the way you're offering it in the U.S.?
If anything, the U.S. market has been even more receptive to what we're doing, and it's anyone moving a business from the UK to the US. It's not an easy task, but it's certainly been a very, very, very fun and enjoyable experience. And it's been amazing how well we've been received here in Chicago, and the products and services that we've brought to the to boards over here have been absolutely taken on board.
So it's interesting you say that. When I think of the space that you operate in, there are probably just a handful of what I will call competitors out there that are sort of offering this product of come and join and find board roles. And the feedback that I've heard from people that have gone this route thinking this will be the great way to find the board is it often feels like I signed up and paid for something. There are all of these opportunities out there, but I never get to them. I see the postings happen, and there's such a wide range. And it seems like a majority of them are nonprofit positions, because for a nonprofit, you're thinking this is great. There's no fee. I can try and get some talent. Can you speak to those concerns that people often see in the industry?
Yeah, I think like I mentioned in one of my earlier comments, I think becoming a member of InTouch is becoming part of a community and getting all the help and advice and learning and educational tools that you need in order to build your own personal brand and get out there and start winning board opportunities. Our jobs board is a complementary aspect of what we do, and really it's about helping yourself to gain all the skills and knowledge and expertise you need in order to start your board opportunities. But what I would say is those non-profit opportunities are absolutely invaluable in really starting to understand what it is to be a board member. And I wouldn't always. I think it's wrong to just dismiss those as lesser opportunities.
Well, I'm sure for the organizational executive listing, the idea that they can list jobs and connect directly with phenomenal talent completely free of charge is an incredibly exciting thing. And that alone would be a great ambition, but I'm sure it's more than that. So how would you describe the ambition for InTouch in the U.S. now that you're here? It's
not just the U.S. We want to be known as the main global business for not just people looking for board opportunities, but also executive roles. So back in the UK, we've expanded out our products and services and what we do to really start helping people who are transitioning from senior management positions into director level positions, and from director level positions to CEO positions. And everything we're doing is becoming more and more focused on education, on helping people, on coaching and mentoring and aiding people in any aspect of their career.
And I talked before about the example on your podcast of someone who's successful going through landing their first board role, and you can hear the excitement and the fun that comes through that. And I'm sure you hear from your members on a regular basis about all these great case studies of success. And I wonder if you'd like to be able to just share one of those stories with us that might resonate with our audience.
I can't obviously mention any names, but we actually had somebody today who joined the network last month and has actually got the first board opportunity today.
Oh,
and
wow.
that is a very, very a rare occurrence, but it can happen. It can happen very quickly, but most of the time it's a long process, and it's about learning and becoming part of a community of people who can help you with that move into a portfolio career.
And I suppose that speaks to one of the big benefits of your technology platform, because it's electronic, because it's real time, because it's so fast. Things can move quickly when organizations want to.
Absolutely, yeah. It can happen. It can happen very quickly, but more often than not, it's a very long process.
Well, Matthew, it's very exciting to hear how your organization not only has grown so well and is adding a lot of value, but really in some ways changing the industry and changing our perceptions of the way board positions have to be filled. That's why I was very excited to have you on the show today to challenge our audience to think about there are lots of different ways to go forward. Matthew, thank you so much for being part of the Boardroom Bound podcast. I'm sure some of our audience are going to be thinking, I need to learn more about In Touch and how this might be helpful for me. What would be the best way for people to be following up and be in contact?
So the most successful parts of our business, and something we get commented on a lot, is our unique combination of online and offline support. We employ a lot of people back in the UK and over in Chicago. Anybody who wants to find out any more information can just go to our website, register your interest, and one of our career advisors will call you and sort you through everything we do in a lot more detail.
Well, Matthew, we were delighted to have you on the show today. Thank you so much for joining us, sharing your insights, and helping all of us to be more boardroom bound.
Fantastic. Thank you.
That's it for this episode of Boardroom Bound. I really enjoyed chatting with Matthew Roberts. It was exciting hearing about In Touch Network and the way that they have changed the recruitment process for board roles. You have an opportunity now that never existed 10 years ago to go out and use technology in a more cost-effective way, potentially in a faster way, to find positions for yourself, and certainly for organizations to find board members at a much lower, almost free cost. So this is something that we wanted to bring to you. This is what I consider a leading organization in its space out there. So thrilled that you would know about it. And if you head over to podcast.gordon.edu, you can get links to all of the resources that we talked about today. And perhaps even more important than that, I just want you to know that the Boardroom Bound team and I are so proud to be your go-to podcast for all things that connect, prepare, and empower you to land a board seat. Be sure to subscribe to this podcast so you don't miss any of the high-quality content we're bringing to you every Wednesday. And thanks for joining me in this episode of the show. I can't wait to share more stories and strategies from brilliant business minds with you again next week. Remember to keep tuning in to be Boardroom Bound.